I grew up mostly in the white world with periodic visits back to our homeland, to our reservation and our people and our culture and our ways to learn who I am and what I am. And then I adopted the white belief in armed struggle. But as I grew older and continued to relearn who I am and to learn all about our worldview as a people, a distinct people, and I learned my language, I realized that armed struggle is the lowest form of civilization ever. And I look at the male, the patriarchal systems of the world, and they call it a civilized world, a civilization, and yet men, the only way they can settle disputes with one another is through mass murder, killing, war. And I look at that and they call that civilization? Mm-hmm. No, that's not civilized. So when I was in the American Indian movement, which was termed one of the 5 most dangerous terrorist groups in America back in the 1970s, and I myself was labeled a terrorist by the United States government, the FBI and the CIA, there were 5 assassination attempts against my life in a 4-year period in the 1970s. As a leader of the American Indian movement. And I was also in prison during that time, where they tried to kill me in prison. So I know all about what the white man will do, in this case, the American white man. And I really want no part of his world anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do not believe it is civilized. I believe it is so brutal. It is more brutal than living in the jungle with animals.
Kako gleda Russell Means na prvo srečanje med Indijanci in belim človekom in kako se to nadaljuje do danes?
Number one, when Cristobal Colon, his correct Spanish name, that the United States government, again, the United States government is so deceitful, such a liar. They changed his name to Christopher Columbus. That's not his name. His name was Cristobal Colon. And it was known in 1492 that the Colon family were a semi-prosperous Jewish family in Spain. Well, that was during the Inquisition. So there's a long story about Columbus. But anyway, we discovered him because he was lost. And he stumbled upon one of our lands, and we discovered him and saved his life. And in repayment, he enslaved us. And he even wrote in the ship's log, and that's how we got the word Indian. Cristobal Colon wrote in the ship's logs, una gente en Dio. Translated into English, that is, a people in with God, who are so peaceful and generous as it to be a fault. Therefore, they would make excellent slaves. That was Cristobal Colon. So instead of looking around and trying to find out what kind of human beings we were and still are, he decided to conquer us and enslave us. And that's been the European worldview ever since. And that is the heck with learning about the human beings they're dealing with. They just want to conquer them and enslave them. Anywhere and everywhere in the world to this present day. And that's why they become such powerful military powers and their love of war. What Cristobal Colon began, instead of looking at us and finding out, hey, wait a minute, there's an entire hemisphere of the world. Half the world doesn't have disease. And look at all the food they have. Now today, 60% of what the world eats comes from us. We produce. We were gene splicing plants, agriculture, while the Europeans were grunting around in caves. That's how far advanced we were, and yet we had developed these, as linguists have ascertained, linguists have found out that the most expressive languages in the world are in the Western Hemisphere, the Indian languages. So consequently, they didn't even figure that out. And here we had the most expressive language in the world, yet we had no word for war or warrior. So if you don't have the word, you don't have the concept. And here we were, gene splicing agriculture, providing food, scientifically, increasing food output. Now just think if you took away 60% of what you eat today, in your country, anywhere in the world. At any rate, this love of war and violence, which persists in the white man to this very day, and any man around, you go around the world, and I don't care which sacred color of the human race they are, the men, when left by themselves, will just revert. Look what happens when rich men get together. Empire happens. Look what happens when poor men are enslaved in prison. Look what happens. They become beasts. I don't care how rich they are or how poor they are. If the men are left alone, they become beasts. And they just want to slaughter one another.
Mr. Means,
yes.
Sorry for interrupting you, but do you think that the so-called emancipation of women that's undergoing in the West is a positive movement?
No. I think it's a stupid movement. Because what the women are doing in the West is they're asking the men, the rulers, the elite, the males that control everything, they're asking them, please, can we be just like you? You see, in the worldview of the indigenous people in at least the Western Hemisphere and in most areas of the world, we believe in celebrating our differences, our sexual differences. We celebrate those differences. Women will never be equal to men, and men certainly will never be equal to women. Women are givers of life, creators of life. I mean, my God, how much more holy and sacred can you become? Now, if you want to celebrate the differences, you know, the homosexuals, they have their worldview and their right. And so do the infirm and the crippled. They have their different worldview because of how they are forced to live their lifestyle, whether they're blind or physically crippled or they're deaf, whatever the situation may be. They have their beauty, and that should be celebrated. And that's why among indigenous people, there wasn't the savagery you see in the patriarchal world, and that's why we got along for eons before. You know, it's odd that when patriarchy began over 6,000 years ago, that's when history begins. So the men are guilty of recording their own atrocities. And that's what they do throughout the world. Who are the heroes throughout the world? Some of them are thinkers, but the majority of them are emperors.